أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. Allah Azza wa Jal, he instructs us as believers and instructs the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to instruct us to lower our gaze and to preserve our private parts. And this is an instruction which is both physical and spiritual, because it is, of course, physical in the sense of lowering our gaze when looking at the opposite gender or that which we may be attracted to of the opposite gender, but also spiritual in the sense of lowering our gaze from the dunya and not becoming attracted to the dunya. And we have spoken about from this minbar so many times, on so many occasions, the fact that all sin stems from a love of this life, its pleasures and its desires. The dunya is the root of all temptation, and removing the dunya from one's heart is the path towards salvation and the acquirement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure in both this life and the next. But unfortunately for us, a test, but also an opportunity for great reward. We live in a time wherein Dunya comes to us even when we are trying to isolate ourselves from the world outside. When we are inside, we have a window into the world outside, and in fact, we have a window into things that you will not even see outside your home if you step outside. And some of the things that we have windows into, some of the things that we can access with these screens are destructive on so many levels. But the destruction of these things is not being spoken about because, as well as being destructive, they are profitable. And when there is money to be made in a society that does not have a framework of morality, anything goes. Even if it means the destruction of society itself. And that's what we're seeing today. One of the dangers that I am referring to is a polluter of homes, of minds, of hearts, of souls. It is a destroyer of men, and unfortunately, a destroyer of women too. It breaks marriages. It breaks marriages. It destroys relationships. And it destroys people before they even have a chance to be people, to be grown-ups. And it is something which some researchers have described as an epidemic. It is a global problem now. And that is the problem of pornography. The problem of pornography. And there are some statistics that you can find online, research. And when I say research, you will find clinical research and you will find casual research. But they are all saying basically the same thing. Here are some statistics. And this is a finding that goes back 12 years ago. 12 years ago. So we can imagine today what it's like. 12 years is a long time. Over a decade ago. A selected research sample, they were taken of young people and they were found to be struggling with internet pornography addiction. And it was found to be most prevalent in men who lived alone or lived with their parents. And bear that in mind, or lived with their parents. This past year, 2025, in the month of October alone, a leading pornography website, Wallahu musta'an, that we can even say that, but a leading pornography website in 1 month, the month of October, in the year of 2025, had 4 billion visits. 4 billion visits. Unbelievable. That's almost half of the global population. And of course, it does not mean 4 billion individual visits. No. Perhaps there are individuals visiting it over and over and over again. But 4 billion visits. In fact, research suggests, and I say suggests because it's not my field of expertise, but one of the largest economies after the military economy is the pornography industry. In fact, if I am not mistaken, it is the largest industry, profitable industry after the military industry. And so going back to the point that was made earlier, it's this thing it destroys people, but it's being left and it's being produced and it's being, in fact, it's being pushed. It's being pushed and it's being advertised because we're talking about explicit pornography. Now today you have that which would have been considered explicit pornography 10 years ago, and it's being pushed onto billboards, it's being pushed through media such as films, TV shows, and so on and so forth. What does it do to the mind when a person is exposed to these indecent images, constantly exposed to these things? What does it do to the mind? What does it do to the heart? What does it do to the soul? In the UK, more recent surveys have shown, listen very carefully, 82% of men in the UK, in the country that we are living in, 82% of men regularly watch pornography. 82% of the population. And of course, based upon a sample, they extract these percentages based upon a sample. But still, 82%. And a third of British males noted that they first watched pornography before the age of 15 years old. A third of those British males that were sampled said that they first watched pornography before the age of 15 years old. Some were as young as 6. Some were as young as 6 years old. Personally, I do not need research to know this, because I have dealt with individuals firsthand, and they have explicitly mentioned that they were exposed to pornography around this age. They have explicitly said, my addiction to pornography started in primary school. The vast majority of pornography consumption takes place via what? Via the smartphone. Via the smartphone. And this is where the problem lies. As was mentioned a few weeks ago, 24%, and for me, this is stunning, 24% of 3 to 4-year-olds in the UK own a smartphone. 24%. What are we doing? What are we doing? There was an article, it was an opinion piece a few years ago, The Guardian, and they suggested, it was a psychologist, she suggested that giving a smartphone to a child is like giving a child 1 gram of cocaine. It has the same impact on the mind. These smartphones, they are digital drug devices. They provide a person with digital dopamine. A person who takes drugs, they have a hit. Likewise, when a person is scrolling through their phone using these apps, it has the same impact. And for a child, 3 to 4 years old, 24%, 26% of 5 to 7-year-olds own a smartphone in the UK. 8 to 11-year-olds, 61%. 96% of 12 to 15-year-olds own a smartphone. When does pornography use start? Between those ages. Between the ages of 6 to 15 years old. And most parents are not even aware of the fact that their child is consuming pornography according to research available today. Parents were surveyed across Europe. 75% of the parents surveyed assumed that their children had never been exposed to pornographic material. 75%. 75%. Whilst the statistic that was given earlier, 86% or so of the male population in the UK are consuming pornography. And children are watching pornography from as young as 6 years old. While 75% of parents are asleep. And we have to be honest with ourselves. This is negligence on our behalf. This is negligence on our behalf. If we are giving our children these devices, and we are not aware of what our children are doing on these devices, or what our children can do on these devices, then we are being negligent parents. We are being negligent parents. Researchers, they conclude that child and adolescent pornography access has soared to such a degree, as was stated in the beginning, that is now considered to be a global pandemic. It is a global health problem. So why is it not being addressed? Money. It's profitable. 80 to 90% of pornography now being accessed via mobile phones. And so I hope that this small amount of insight into some of the statistics that are available online wakes some people up. And I would strongly advise you, go home and look up the statistics. Look at child pornography use in the UK. Look at adolescent pornography use in the UK. Adult pornography use is a problem in and of itself. But it becomes a far worse problem when it is an adolescent or a child. Some of the underlying reasons for pornography use, according to research, some of the underlying reasons why are people turning to pornography. Number one, and of course the most obvious, dissatisfaction with intimacy in marriage. A dissatisfaction with intimacy in marriage. Does that justify the use of pornography? Absolutely not. But it means there is an issue there that needs to be addressed. There is an issue that needs to be addressed. Number two, making marriage difficult for our children and our young adults. When we as a community make marriage difficult for a young man or a young lady who has desires, then we are inviting them to other means. We are opening the door to haram. When we are making the mahar prices too extravagant and expensive for a young person to afford, when we are expecting thousands upon thousands of pounds to be spent on the daughter marriage, the wedding, then we are turning people away. And so we have to make marriage easy. The Prophet ﷺ instructed us to make marriage easy. The walima in Islam is supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be something which puts a person in debt for half of his marriage life. Number one, intimacy problems in the marriage. Number two, making marriage difficult. Number three, as was mentioned earlier, the dopamine effect. It's a drug. These apps, these videos, the way that these mediums of entertainment, pornography being one of the pioneering mediums of entertainment. Yes, research shows that today a lot of advertisement online has been shaped and influenced by two areas. Number one, pornography. Number two, the military. And so when a person consumes these mediums, there has been a lot of psychological research put in to these mediums. How to get this person to come back. How to turn this person into a regular consumer, a customer. And so when a person watches one of these filthy videos, it releases chemicals in the brain that brings him back. And it becomes a loop. The more the person consumes, the more addicted the person becomes. And so a person who is suffering with this addiction, they have to understand that by consuming, you are feeding and making the addiction worse. You have to treat it like a drug. You have to treat it like a drug. And the first step for a person who is addicted to drugs, the first step for this person to address his issue or her issue is to admit that he or she is addicted. To say, I am addicted to this. Treat it like a drug because it is a drug. It has the same impact on the mind as a drug. Number four, for some people it becomes a means of emotional medication. It becomes a means of emotional medication. Meaning, it is a psychological and an emotional issue. A person is turning to pornography because they have underlying emotional problems. And of course, this is not a solution. But for us, we have to try to understand what's happening. Number five, it's an attempt to alleviate mental health problems, depression, low self-esteem, anxiety, nervousness. And again, go online, look at the research available. Number five or number six, and this, you have to forgive me for mentioning it, but it has to be mentioned. And this is it's a darker problem, but it is one nonetheless that has to be addressed. And in fact, it is unfortunately more prevalent than we like to admit within our Muslim community. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse. There is research to show that pornography addiction is linked to sexual abuse and molestation in childhood. Those who are sexually abused or molested in childhood, they are more prone to be addicted to things like pornography in their adult life. And this is something that is taking place within our communities, whether we like to admit it or not. It's something that is taking place. And it's something that has to be addressed. And of course, the perpetrators of such acts are foul, disgusting, wicked, evil. And personally, I find it difficult to call them Muslim. Personally, I cannot call someone who abuses or molests a child, a Muslim. I cannot. But this is happening within our community. And pornography addiction can be a consequence of this happening. What are the consequences of this on the person, him or herself, the consequences? Number one, there is a psychological impact from the consumption. Psychological problems can lead to the consumption of pornography, but there is also a psychological impact from the consumption of pornography. In fact, research shows, and this is particularly for children, research shows that children who are exposed to pornography or who consume pornography at a young age, they show the same psychological consequences as a child who has been molested or sexually abused. They show the same psychological consequences, the same difficulties as a person who was sexually abused or molested as a child. This is how serious this issue is. Pornography is not something to be taken lightly. And you will be surprised. For those of you that are perhaps wondering, why is this being mentioned in a khutbah? Why is this being addressed? Because it is a real problem. A real problem. Number two, and of course this is perhaps the easiest to guess, it leads to problems in one's interpersonal relationship skills. A person who becomes a regular consumer of pornography, research suggests and shows this person is prone to depression, to low self-esteem, to heightened feelings of constant guilt. And this is in everyday relationships. As for marriage, divorce, it leads to divorce. It leads to divorce. And there are so many cases like this. So many cases where a man is unable to be intimate with his wife because he is addicted to pornography, which leads to the following consequence: perversion of desire. Perversion of desire. Research suggests that a person who consumes pornography is prone to perversion of his or her desire, such as coercive sexual behavior, wanting to engage in coercive sexual behavior, rape, molestation, pedophilia. Yes, pornography leads to these things. This is how grave this issue is. This is how serious this problem is. And this is why it has to be addressed. It's not something to be taken lightly. Likewise, it can lead to a person developing attraction to the same gender. It can lead to a person developing attraction to the same gender. It can lead to depression, self-esteem issues, anxiety. All of these things stem from the use of pornography, which has become, unfortunately, a casual endeavor for many today. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف أنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. There is no person who is safe from sin. If one man can slip up, any man can slip up. If one woman can make a mistake, any woman can make a mistake. We are all prone. We are all prone. There are those who have endeavored to memorize the Quran and they have fallen victim to such mediums. There are individuals who come from good homes and they fall victim to such mediums. No person should assume themselves or their children safe. No person should assume themselves or their children safe. This is an issue that has to be taken very seriously. It is not a matter to take lightly. There is tawakkul and there is tawakkul. Tawakkul is to take the means of protection, of fulfillment, and then to rely on Allah for the outcome. Tawakkul is to be heedless, to be negligent, and then to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not reliance upon Allah. That's not reliance upon Allah. And we have been instructed قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا, to protect ourselves and our families from the hellfire, which means you take the means of protecting yourself and your families. You take the means of protecting yourself and your families, and then you rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the outcome. And of course, one of the greatest means that we can all engage in immediately, dua. Allahumma ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Allahumma a'udhu bika min al-fitni ma dhahara minha wa ma batan. We can make dua. Allahumma ja'alni muqima as-salati wa min dhurriyyati. We can make dua, yes, but we also have to take practical means. If I have given my child a smartphone, I need to install apps that allow me to monitor what they're doing. There are apps, there are programs, and this is not spying. No, this is protecting. You will not put a 15-year-old into a car and expect them to drive safely. Even if they can drive, you protect them from other drivers by not allowing them to drive until they reach an age of maturity wherein they have the ability to react correctly. Likewise with smartphones. You will not give your child drugs and assume that they know not to use it. When you give a child a smartphone, you are giving a child access to that which is far worse than drugs. Far worse than drugs. It's better for a child to become addicted to smoking cigarettes than become addicted to pornography. It's far better for a child to smoke than to become addicted to pornography. That's how pornography is destructive. Destructive. And so any person who is suffering with such an addiction, any person who is consuming such illicit material, stop. If the addiction is too much that you cannot do it by yourself, seek help. Seek help. There is no harm, there is no shame in seeking help. We all need help. We all have our struggles. And any person who has given their child a smartphone and they are not aware of what their child is doing with that smartphone, or they've given a child a smart device, or they've put a computer in their child's room, or they have internet access and they are not monitored, start to monitor your child. Start to monitor your child. Wake up and take notes. Ask them. Look at what they're doing. Do not assume children to be innocent in a day and age wherein corruption starts early. Corruption starts early. And so we have to be on guard. We as a community have been given a moral framework. We as a community have been given intelligence. We as a community have been given the understanding of right and wrong. And so we as a community can do better. We can do better. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and our families and the Muslim community at large and the non-Muslims, as we are the light bearers for everyone. We are the last vanguard of righteousness. That is our role. And so we have to take that role upon with responsibility that is befitting of the role. اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك اللهم طهر فساد قلوبنا يا رب العالمين اللهم احفظنا من الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم ارضى عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر الصحابة أجمعين اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا واحفظنا وأقم الصلاة.